Some immediate reaction to the Prime Minister's comments now. Let's go live to stunning Adelaide. The South Australian Premier Stephen Marshall joins us now. Stephen Marshall, thank you for your time. The Prime Minister wants to name and shame states that don't do enough hazard reduction burning, and this is before fire seasons, of course. Does that sit well with you?
Well, look, I certainly think that we need to be doing our hazard reduction before the fire season each year. That was the case on Kangaroo Island with all the prescribed burns and the coal burns, as I understand it, were completed. That hasn't always been the case, but it certainly was the case in the lead up to this fire season. And I think we do need to be sure. Every state needs, well, I think has an obligation to make sure that those prescribed burns and coal burns are done in accordance with the plan. So
you're saying Kangaroo Island did everything it could have done in terms of hazard reduction and prescribed burns, and we still had almost 2/3 of the island burn?
We had catastrophic conditions on Kangaroo Island on the 3rd of January. Our prescribed burns were done, but nothing was going to stop that fire. Now, of course, we can go back and look at whether the regime that we had in place was enough, and I think that's a very important inquiry to undertake. But in terms of what had been planned for Kangaroo Island, they had been completed in accordance with that schedule.
Right.
But Laura, the fires that were on January the 3rd were absolutely catastrophic. Very not similar at all, in fact, from the fire that went through the Chase National Park in 2007, which was a slow burn. People talk about putting in barriers and brakes. That would have helped in 2007. I'm not sure what would have helped on the 3rd of January. It was absolutely catastrophic.
So you're saying that there's really nothing more you could have done to reduce the size and ferocity of those fires this season on Kangaroo Island?
No, I think we need to do a review. In fact, we do a review after every single fire in South Australia, not just looking at our own fires, but we review every other fire around Australia and look at their recommendations. We've got to continuously improve our performance. We've got to make ourselves more climate resilient here in South Australia. The reality is we're going to face more bushfires into the future. We need to be more resilient. We need to be more prepared. And these inquiries need to take place so that we can put ourselves in the very, very best position. But what I am saying is the previous regime that had been in place with regards to prescribed burns and coal burns were completed on Kangaroo Island. Now, we can go back and review whether we need to do more, and many people are suggesting we do.
So maybe that wasn't adequate. Are you talking about into the future looking at things like more land clearing when it comes to perhaps loosening those vegetation laws as well? The Prime Minister is also talking about something like a national standard when it comes to hazard reduction. Would that work?
Well, look, I think that all the information that we can gather is valuable, quite frankly. Whether or not it needs to be a national approach, we'll be taking it very seriously in South Australia, whether it is a national approach or it isn't a national approach. We've got to get this right. But I think there is some value in the states working collectively, sharing ideas. I think this happens anecdotally at the moment, but formalising that could be a good option for the country.
Well, here comes the climate change question. Do you think the federal government is doing enough?
Well, I'm pleased that they have ratified that they're going to achieve and in fact exceed the commitments that they made with regards to the Paris commitment and targets. But I think we all need to be doing more. We're certainly doing a lot more here in South Australia. We've got good plans in place to reduce our emissions and in fact get to net zero emissions by 2050 or before. We released our climate change direction statement last year. Early this year, we'll be putting our climate change strategy in place and rolling that out, making sure that we can move to more renewable energy in South Australia. But we've got to do it in a way which is not going to damage our economy at the same time. We're moving towards eliminating single-use plastics in South Australia, putting more trees in place and the greening to reduce the heat stress here in our environment in South Australia. And of course, doing everything we can with regards to coastal erosion. In fact, our most recent budget, Laura, we put $52 million to try and tackle coastal erosion. That's really at the forefront of the impact of climate change here in our state.
And Premier, you're saying we all need to do more. What does the federal government need to do in terms of more?
Well, there's a lot of focus on the federal government, Laura, but all states, all businesses, all households need to take the strain on this one. There is no doubt about that whatsoever. I'm not sure exactly what Prime Minister Morrison is going to be able to do it personally himself.
And well, you have a net zero emissions target by 2050, as you've just stated here. The federal government seems reluctant to go down that track. Would you encourage Scott Morrison to consider a similar target, which you've just strongly advocated?
Yeah, I think all governments, state, federal, local government, businesses and households need to be understanding that we are living in an environment where there is a change to our climate that is going to have effects. Now, I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that what we do here in South Australia is going to affect global weather patterns, but we need to be taking the strain. We need to be leading on this issue, making sure that we are responsible ourselves with our emissions.
Well, if
but
you
more
think
than
it's
that,
achievable,
making sure that we are climate resilient.
For South Australia, do you think net zero emissions is achievable for the entire country?
I do. I think that we should be heading towards that. In fact, I'm hopeful when we bring down our final climate strategy early this year that we can go in harder, lead in harder on our targets, because I do think the people, certainly the people in South Australia, are looking for us to take a leadership role in this important area.
All right, you're also Tourism Minister there in South Australia. You can see you've placed yourself outside the tour down under. I know you've been really encouraging people to get back to South Australia because people have stayed away because of the bushfire crisis. Premier, give us your best pitch.
Come to South Australia, book a holiday in the Adelaide Hills or on Kangaroo Island. If you can't come to South Australia, when you go out to a restaurant, buy a wine from the Adelaide Hills or buy your cheese or seafood from Kangaroo Island. That's the very best thing that we can be doing in Australia at the moment to support those areas which are affected by bushfires. It's not just about putting out the fires, but it's about helping with the recovery of the economy. So we've launched a campaign, Book Them Out. So for those viewers, southaustralia.com.au, go and book yourself a beautiful holiday on Kangaroo Island or the beautiful Adelaide Hills.
It was pretty good, I've got to say. And I would say just don't buy a wine, buy a bottle perhaps. It's just a small improvement. Thanks so much for your time this morning.
Thank you.